Angela, 42. They say betrayal never comes from your enemies. And standing in the middle of that office, holding a lunch bag that had grown cold in my hand, I realized the person I had trusted the most had been orchestrating his deception right under my nose. I had devoted decades to our family, to his dream, to our children. And this is how it all unraveled, with one dress being smoothed down and a look of guilty panic on a stranger's face. My name is Angela. I am 42 years old, a mother of 2, and until recently, I was the quiet force behind my husband's so-called success. We lived in Fort Worth, Texas, in a Spanish-style house with high ceilings and sprawling trees, in the backyard where our children, Nathan, 12, and Eliza, 8, used to play soccer and chase fireflies. My husband Charles built his own marketing company from the ground up, and in the early days, when it was nothing but a desk in our garage and a second-hand printer, I was his only employee. I was the one designing his first logos, answering emails while breastfeeding, holding down our finances, even negotiating small vendor contracts while preparing dinners. And when the business grew, I stepped aside. He needed staff, he needed lawyers, he needed freedom. I was happy to step back, raise our children, and watch our empire thrive. That was the trade. He worked, I nurtured, he earned, I supported. Or so I believed. Years passed, and his name became recognizable across Texas. The company moved out of the home office and into a gleaming building in downtown Dallas, just 4 blocks from Dealey Plaza. He started spending more time traveling, attending conventions, networking in Manhattan and San Francisco. I never once questioned him. After all, he had always been the man I fell in love with back at the University of Houston, ambitious, brilliant, tireless. But ambition has sharp edges, and I was about to learn how deep those cuts could go. It all started with something so simple. I made lunch. Turkey avocado wraps, his favorite. I was downtown for an appointment anyway and thought it would be a nice surprise. When I walked into the building, the receptionist recognized me immediately. I still knew many of the employees. They welcomed me like an old friend. But when I got to Charles's floor, something was off. The doors to his office were slightly ajar. I walked in without knocking. Why would I need to knock? And that is when I saw her. A young woman, no older than 26, with honey blonde hair, tight navy skirt, and a silk blouse askew around her collarbone. She bolted to the side, pretending to organize files, and tugged down the hem of her dress with the frantic grace of someone caught mid-act. Charles stepped out of the adjoining private bathroom, looking startled and flushed. His tie was crooked, his shirt half-tucked. He smiled too quickly, thanked me for lunch, and introduced her. This was Emily, his new executive assistant. She was just helping him prepare for a client call. I forced a smile and handed him his lunch bag. My hand trembled slightly as I pulled away. For the next 3 days, that scene looped through my head like a glitching video. The way she ran, the awkward tension, the unmistakable scent of expensive perfume lingering in that office. I knew something was wrong. Intuition is a gift, and I had spent too long ignoring mine. This time, I followed it. That Friday night, after putting the kids to bed, I drove back to his office. I still had access to the building through Charles's key card. He had never revoked it, too confident I would never question him. The building was quiet. Cleaning crews had gone. I headed straight to the server room. Years ago, I helped him set up the internal database. He never changed the architecture. His office had security cameras, of course, but the footage was restricted. Only Charles had clearance, or so he thought. I bypassed the firewall, ran admin-level access through his card, and retrieved the logs. The folder was named Client Briefs, Private. Inside, date-stamped video files revealed the real truth. I sat in the dark, watching footage of my husband pressed up against the very desk I helped him buy, with the same girl whose name I had only learned days before. In the corner of the frame, a bottle of red wine, 2 glasses, music playing through his laptop. It had been going on for weeks, probably longer. I watched him kiss her. I watched him whisper into her ear. I watched him lie to me in real time, in every frame, in every breath. And I realized that the man who had promised me loyalty had replaced me with someone new, someone who never saw him through his struggle, who never held his hand through bankruptcy threats, or pulled double shifts to pay off his student loans. I sent the footage to myself. Then I sent it to my lawyer. I did not ask for an explanation. I did not confront him. I did not scream or cry. Instead, I weaponized everything I had ever done for him. Because that company, that office, that structure, I had built the bones of it with my hands and my time and my silence, and now I would tear it apart without ever raising my voice. My lawyer filed for divorce, asset separation, custody, and financial restitution in a Dallas County court the following Monday. I had documentation of all my unpaid labor, every business email, every invoice from those early years where I worked without a title or paycheck. Texas recognizes spousal contribution, and I was about to get my share. Charles was blindsided. He showed up at the house that night, yelling through the door, asking why I was doing this. I did not answer. The locks had already been changed. The kids were with my sister in Plano for the weekend. I watched from the upstairs window as the man who once called me his angel slammed his hands on the front porch railing, powerless. The court sided with me. I got full custody. I got half the company. I got the house. He lost his role as CEO and was reassigned by the board to a token position in marketing. His precious secretary was quietly let go. Their affair had damaged the company's reputation, and investors were skittish. He now works in a satellite office somewhere near Lubbock. I do not care where. But the worst part? It was the look on Nathan's face when he asked me if his dad was coming to his baseball tournament. I told him no, and I felt something in me crack. Not from sadness, but from rage. How dare this man throw away his family for someone so temporary, so disposable, someone who had no stake in our life. He had destroyed a family legacy over lust and ego, and now he lived with that choice every day. I do not regret what I did. I chased him out of my life and took back everything I had ever given. I was the architect of his success and the witness to his fall. And while I wish I could have spared my children the heartbreak, I will never again let a man think he can replace loyalty with betrayal and walk away clean. My only mistake was assuming that his secretary was just an employee. Turns out my suspicions were not only valid, they were tragically correct. And now he lives with that truth. Alone. Update 1. I knew the moment the lawsuit was delivered that the calm I had built around myself was about to be tested. The papers reached him before I ever planned to see his face again, and the reaction was exactly what I expected, and still somehow worse. The divorce filing, the custody request, the asset freeze, the injunction barring him from entering the house without permission, all of it hit him in one clean strike. He had spent years believing he controlled every variable in his life, and now the illusion shattered in a single afternoon. He came home that same evening, driving far too fast, parking crooked in the driveway like a man who believed urgency could undo consequences. I watched from inside as he marched up the walkway with that familiar posture of entitlement, the same posture he had worn when the company started succeeding and he stopped asking instead of demanding. He tried the door. The locks did not budge. He knocked. Then he pounded. Then he shouted my name through the glass as if volume alone would restore his authority. I did not open the door. I did not step outside. I did not owe him an audience. Instead, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, the house silent except for his escalating anger outside. The children were not there. I had made sure of that. I was not about to let them witness their father unravel in real time. Eventually, his knocking slowed, then stopped. My phone buzzed endlessly, with missed calls and messages that shifted from confusion to outrage in a matter of minutes. He demanded explanations. He demanded to know what I thought I was doing. He demanded to be let inside his house, still calling it his, as if the court documents had not already redefined reality. I responded only once. I sent him a single file, a short clip, less than 30 seconds, just enough to remove any doubt. The frame opened on his office, his desk, his hands, her presence. There was no sound, no need for it. The visual alone carried all the truth he had worked so hard to hide. I imagined him watching it wherever he was standing, probably still in the driveway, probably replaying it in disbelief, finally understanding that the version of events he had curated for himself was over. For a moment, there was silence. Then the messages resumed, but the tone had changed. The shock gave way to defense. The defense to offense. Instead of remorse, instead of shame, instead of even a hollow apology, he pivoted. He accused me of invading his privacy. He accused me of sabotaging his career. He accused me of humiliating him. And then came the accusation that cut deeper than all the others, the one that made my hands go cold on the table. He blamed me for his affair. According to him, I had stopped paying attention. I had focused too much on the children. I had become distant. I had prioritized routine over passion. He framed his betrayal as a response, not a choice, as if my role as a mother and partner somehow justified his deception. He rewrote our entire marriage in a matter of paragraphs, turning himself into a neglected victim and me into the architect of his dissatisfaction. He spoke as if the years I spent supporting his ambition, sacrificing my own independence, and holding our family together were invisible. as if the foundation I built no longer counted once he decided he wanted something shinier. I sat there reading those messages, each one more detached from reality than the last, and I felt a strange mixture of clarity and disbelief. This was the man I had shared a life with. This was the man I had trusted with my future, and the example I wanted my children to follow. And instead of taking responsibility when confronted with undeniable proof, he chose to attack the very person he had wronged. He chose to shift blame rather than carry it. He chose to protect his ego over his family. Outside, he eventually left. I watched his car disappear down the street, headlights fading like the final act of a performance I no longer had any interest in watching. The house felt heavier after that, not with sadness, but with the weight of realization. Betrayal I could process, lies I could dismantle. But the fact that he looked at his own actions and still found a way to accuse me of causing them left me stunned. That was the moment everything truly clicked. Not when I saw the video, not when I filed for divorce, but when I realized that even caught, even exposed, even facing the collapse of his carefully constructed world, he still believed I was the one at fault. And sitting alone in that quiet house, reading his words, I was genuinely shocked that the man who had destroyed our family had the audacity to accuse me of being the reason he did it. Update 2. By the time the court date arrived, I had already learned to stop underestimating how far he would go to protect his pride. The hearings stretched across weeks in a Dallas courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, a place where lives were reduced to exhibits, timestamps, and sworn statements. I walked in every day, calm on the surface, carrying binders filled with evidence, timelines, and records that told a story far more consistent than the one he tried to invent. I was not fighting with emotion anymore. I was fighting with facts. The ruling came down on a Thursday morning, and it was decisive. Full custody of the children was awarded to me. The judge cited stability, primary caregiving, documented deception, and a pattern of manipulative behavior that did not align with the best interests of the children. The house was awarded to me as well, recognized as the children's primary residence and the only home they had ever known. The company assets were still under review, but the financial freeze remained in place. When the gavel came down, it felt less like victory and more like a door closing forever. He did not take it well. At first, his anger stayed focused on me, where it had always lived. Endless messages, thinly veiled threats about appeals, accusations that I had turned the children against him, claims that the court system was biased. I ignored all of it. My lawyer handled communication. I focused on rebuilding routines, school drop-offs, quiet dinners, and the fragile sense of safety my children were still clinging to. I believed foolishly that even he would draw a line when it came to them. I was wrong. A week after the ruling, he had his first supervised visit. The court required it to take place in a neutral setting, but he insisted on seeing them at a family services office near Arlington, a place designed to feel welcoming with soft chairs and bright murals that could not hide the tension in the air. I stayed nearby, waiting in my car, trying to convince myself that whatever resentment he felt toward me would never be redirected at the children. That belief lasted exactly 1 hour. When they came back out, Nathan's face was pale and stiff, the way it gets when he is trying not to cry. Eliza clung to his arm, unusually silent. They said very little, but children do not need to explain what adults refuse to acknowledge. That night, after they were asleep, I checked the tablet Nathan used for schoolwork. It had automatically synced audio and video from earlier that day. He had turned it on instinctively, the same way children do when they sense something is wrong and want proof that it was real. What I saw made my stomach drop. He had not touched them, but his words were sharp and cruel, stripped of any restraint. He spoke about how their existence ruined his life, how everything he worked for was taken from him because of them, how he never wanted to be tied down by family. He framed them as burdens, as obstacles, as mistakes that cost him freedom and success. He did not notice the tablet recording. He did not notice their faces crumpling inward as his anger spilled over onto the smallest, most defenseless targets in the room. I watched the footage once, then I watched it again, hoping I had misunderstood, hoping context would soften it. It did not. His rage was unfiltered, redirected away from the court he could not control and onto the children who could not fight back. My hands shook as I saved the file, backed it up, and sent it directly to my attorney and to the police. This was no longer a custody issue. This was a safety issue. The response was swift. Child Protective Services opened a case within 48 hours. His visitation rights were suspended pending investigation. The company's board was notified, not by me, but by their own legal department once the police report became public record. Investors do not like unpredictability, and they like documented emotional instability even less. Overnight, the man who once believed himself untouchable found his world shrinking at an alarming rate. He blamed me, of course. He always would. But this time, his excuses carried no weight. There was video. There was a pattern. There were children whose fear spoke louder than his justifications. The company initiated an internal review that threatened his remaining position. His name began circulating in contexts he could not spin or silence. He had spent years building a facade of control, and now every crack was visible. I sat in the living room of the house the court confirmed was ours, watching my children sleep on the couch after a movie night I pretended was normal, and I felt a kind of shock I was not prepared for. I could process betrayal directed at me. I could endure anger aimed at my decisions. But seeing him unload his fury onto the children, seeing him treat their existence as collateral damage in his personal collapse, shattered whatever fragments of empathy I still held. That was the moment I truly understood that I had not just ended a marriage. I had intervened before something far worse could take root. And I was left stunned by the realization that when everything was taken from him, he did not look inward. He looked at our children and chose them as the outlet for his rage. Update 3. The breakup should have been the end. Divorce finalized, custody won, property settled. In any reasonable world, that would have been closure. But I had learned the hard way that men like Charles do not understand the concept of closure. They understand possession, they understand control, and when those things are stripped from them, they do not go quietly. The problem was, I was no longer interested in silence, and I still had one card left to play. The video my son recorded, the one that captured Charles venting his venom toward the children, had already triggered a police investigation and a formal suspension of visitation. But I knew the full weight of what had happened still had not landed where it needed to. I watched my children shrink into themselves after that day, their laughter less frequent, their sleep more restless, their eyes shadowed with the confusion that only a child experiences when they are made to feel like a mistake. And that is when I made the most difficult decision of my life. I took the footage and filed an additional report, this time with a formal psychological evaluation of both children attached. The therapist we had been working with had documented every session, every drawing, every whispered admission of fear. Her report was clinical, objective, and devastating. It detailed the emotional regression, the anxiety spikes, the way both children had internalized blame for their father's fury. It categorized their experiences as psychological trauma directly caused by their father's verbal aggression during court-approved visitation. There was no escaping the language. There was no spinning this into another personal attack from me. This was clinical evidence of harm. The court convened again within a month. This time, it was not just family court, it was a civil trial assessing long-term impact and damages. The judge reviewed the video and read the report silently, stone-faced. Charles sat across the room, visibly tense, his jaw locked, hands clenched on the table in front of him as the expert testified. When the video was played for the courtroom, he shook his head repeatedly, but he said nothing. Not because he felt remorse, but because even he understood that the truth was undeniable. His voice, his words, his venom, caught and catalogued. The judgment was swift and brutal. The court ruled in favor of the children, citing irreversible emotional damage caused by sustained verbal aggression from the father. Custody was made permanent, with 0 visitation rights. All parental privileges were revoked. The judge ordered a substantial financial settlement to be paid immediately, citing not only the trauma caused, but the direct impact it would have on the children's long-term mental health. The sum included liquidation of all remaining personal and shared assets, including the company. Charles exploded in that courtroom. He stood up and began shouting, pointing, accusing the judge of being biased, accusing me of fabricating the entire thing, accusing the therapist of manipulating the children. Security moved in quickly, but it took 3 bailiffs to restrain him. As he was dragged from the courtroom in handcuffs, still screaming about injustice, I sat still, with my hands folded in my lap, watching the man who once ran million-dollar deals being hauled out like a criminal. And for once, the world saw him for what he truly was. The company was transferred to me in a legal arrangement that felt less like business and more like poetic irony. The same company I had helped build from nothing, the same company he tried to hide his affair behind, the same company he claimed I had no role in. It now had my name on every legal document. I sold it within 6 weeks, a clean sale, no strings attached, no legacy to preserve. The money I received was enough for the children and me to live not just comfortably, but abundantly for the rest of our lives. I paid off the house in full. I set up trust funds for both children. I donated a portion to a nonprofit focused on domestic recovery for emotionally abused children. And I left the rest untouched, like a war chest that would never be needed, because the war was over. Charles vanished after that, disbarred from his own business network, blacklisted by former clients, shunned by investors. No one wanted to be associated with the man who verbally attacked his own children in a courtroom-recorded scandal. He tried to rebuild, but nothing stuck. His name had become poison in the circles he used to dominate. I heard rumors of him living out of state, couch hopping, trying to reinvent himself under the radar. But no one cared. He had become irrelevant, unneeded, unwelcome, alone. It was a difficult decision to go this far, to push the legal system until it broke through every layer of protection he had wrapped around himself. But I did it because I had to. For Nathan, for Eliza, for every time I watched them flinch when the doorbell rang, for every nightmare that made them crawl into my bed in the middle of the night, for every moment they asked why their father did not love them enough to stay kind. He thought he could destroy a family and walk away clean. Instead, he lost everything. And I stood in the wreckage, not as a victim, but as the one who rose from it, holding the hands of the children he tried to break, building a life that was no longer tethered to his ruin. And in the end, he was left with nothing. No money, no reputation, no one left who needed him, not even his own blood.